I'm just setting up the live feed on YouTube, folks. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. I expect more and more people to join us over the next few minutes. It's a Saturday. Some of us are working. Some people. Okay, just give me a second. Let me just put. All right, I was just trying to put YouTube on mute here. Okay, so wonderful. Welcome, everybody, all of you who joined in today from wherever you are, working out of your offices or your homes. Many of you are hopefully having a nice weekend, and I can see people wishing Vinayak Chaturthi and Ganesh Chaturthi. So very happy Ganesh Chaturthi to all of you. A little bit muted and different this year, but I hope Ganpati arrives at each one of your homes and you have a lot of blessings and happiness in the days and weeks and months to come. It's been a harsh year for all of us, but I believe all of us have used this time to learn and grow. At least a lot of people in this call today who are joining this session, Iempower Talk session, have spent this time in the last few months learning and growing and developing. So that's been wonderful. All right, guys, I'll not be taking too much of the attention here because I'm not the star of the day. The star of the day is Rohit Nayyar, CA Rohit Nayyar. Rohit is incredible person. I haven't known Rohit for a long time, but whatever little I know he's just the perfect guest to invite for this talk session. And for all of you people who are just sort of starting out their careers or are in very early stages of your career, some of you are still studying, this is going to be a really valuable session. Many of you joined my session with Sanjay Khanna a couple of weeks back, and you gave great feedback for that. Sanjay, of course, is a phenomenal leader, and so is Rohit. So Rohit is a chartered accountant from 1998, pretty much the same batch that I am. But Rohit is far more skilled and educated than I am. I stopped at doing chartered accountancy. Rohit went on and did his company secretaryship as well and completed his CISA as well. Rohit right now is working as the CFO of Care India, which is one of the largest NGOs in India and in the world, actually. And Rohit spent more than 20 years in the corporate world, spent a lot of time with Dell, happens to be a highly rewarded CFO. Rohit's won multiple awards for his accomplishments as a finance leader, as a CFO. He's very active in the fraternity and community. He does a lot of sessions, a lot of talks. And when I asked Rohit if he would be okay with joining this session, he was very forthcoming. And I'm really glad, Rohit, you're here because while we have a lot of successful chartered accountants, there are very few who have been able to build the kind of diverse profile that you've built. And I thought that'll be most exciting and interesting for our audience today. So welcome once again, Rohit. We're going to take about 60 minutes of your time, and hopefully these people who are going to watch us live today and people who will continue to watch us over the next many months and years on YouTube will take inspiration from your journey and learn a lot from you. So welcome once again. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Abhinav, for that extremely generous introduction. My pleasure to be here. A very good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this auspicious occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi. I wish you peace and happiness all over.
Thank you.
I'm now into my third decade of professional career, and every step of this journey has been filled with an opportunity to experiment and push the boundaries of conventional practices. The result has been incredible learning and growth that has benefited me both professionally and personally, some of which I'd like to share with you today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So as Abhinav said, I completed my...
So Rohit, yeah, no. So I actually wanted to, people to hear about your career journey, starting from the fact that you chose to become a chartered accountant. It always fascinates me why people choose to become a chartered accountant. Is it only about money, or is it about something else? Is it about, the thirst and hunger for knowledge or for doing something more meaningful with life? So how did you make that decision, and the decision subsequently that you made in your career? Just help this audience understand your career journey. which has been so amazing?
Sure, definitely. Well, I happen to come from a business family, so in fact, before me, none of either my parents or anybody was really into a profession. And so, as I was studying, I really developed a great facet for numbers. The accounting, finance used to really fascinate me, and that's where I decided that probably I'll make a career in the accounting world. Those times, in the 90s, India was still pretty much a closed economy. So chartered accountants and were looked at very differently from the current times. But I just happened to develop my interest in the accounting field. Uh, Got through Sri Ram College of Commerce, which is one of the pioneer institute, and my love for numbers grew, and I was also hugely inspired by one of my father's friend who was a chartered accountant, and I really used to admire his work, and that sort of built on to my mind that really I also need to pursue something like this.
Yeah.
So and my family, I'm really thankful, they were very open, although I am the only son and my father had a business, but he never really forced me to join that. He kept it open for me that go ahead and explore, because CA course, as we all know, is one of the toughest exam.
Right.
And probably I would not have even also fully planned that how soon I would be able to complete my CA.
Yeah.
But I decided to give it a shot, and my parents' blessings and God willing, I cleared everything in first attempt, and there I was. That I said that okay, now having also cleared the exam, I would rather make a career in as a CA itself. So then I also added company secretary ship, and I completed, in fact, both simultaneously back in '97, and joined the industry. And so it was very clear in my mind, and that was probably, being a novice, I would say the only thing I sort of knew was that, there is a position at the top in finance, which is the CFO's position. So that's where I put my sights on. And as I joined the industry, I really used to interact with my seniors in the company to understand how they have charted their career course and how they have reached this position. So there I learned that with the goal to really develop myself as a CFO, I need to focus on adding disparate arrows in my quiver to ensure holistic career development. So what that means is that, pure accounting role would not really take me to that position. So hence I started planning and started, looking at how I can continue to gain experience in varied roles beyond accounting. So I got a chance to do fundraising with banks and institutions, taxation, both domestic and international, budgeting, auditing, MIS, controllership roles across industries, ranging from steel to software, and landed up with Dell, the technology giant, in end 2006. I'd say a key contributor of my success during this decade was an application of a Japanese concept called Gemba. Though I haven't worked in any Japanese company, but I'm sure most of you may already be aware of what Gemba is.
No, I'm sure not a lot of people are aware. So how do you spell it? GEMBA?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, Gemba means the place where the action or the problem actually occurred. In manufacturing parlance, it would mean the factory setup. I learned that as finance professionals, at times we need to move away from, the number crunching and spreadsheet analysis and spend time with other cross-functional teams to deepen the understanding of the ground realities. So I was always eager to know how the flow happens in terms of from where the input comes to us in the finance accounting function, and what's the output of our work, with our goal to how can we add value to the organization. And this approach helped me immensely to be successful at managing the curveballs and challenging the status quo. Well, one of my mentors really told me that the most dangerous phrase in the business is, we have always done it this way.
This way. Yeah.
So my approach even till date has been always around what and how I can do it better. So here's my first success mantra for you all. Be an achiever of purpose instead of a mere prisoner of procedure. And for this, it's very important to learn the rules of the game and then play it better than anyone else. Moving on, in my second decade, all of which I spent in Dell, I cultivated emotional intelligence. I learned that IQ or technical competence alone is not enough to move up the corporate ladder. You should have very high EQ, emotional quotient, a way to get on with people. I, again, as I said, it's important to learn the rules of the game. I started talking to people about how one can develop this, started reading about it, and practicing to listen more, understand before being understood, focusing on broader team, talent management. And again, the results were quite rewarding. My work profile expanded exponentially and was soon leading a global team with team members across the US, France, Asia Pacific, etc. And something which is very close to my heart, I was recognized with an Inspiring Leader Award, which was a reflection of a blend of IQ and EQ traits in a leader. So my next mantra would be that one must utilize and balance both intelligence, IQ and EQ, grow, and be positioned as a true leader. And then after 2 decades in the corporate world, I made another conscious move to transition into the development sector and joined CARE in 2007. CARE is in 100 countries. In India also, it has been there for 70 years. So I was quite fascinated by the work which the CARE India team does. So sort of took this plunge and joined back in April 17. And let me tell you that there is a misconception that the role of a not-for-profit CFO is somehow less intense. In fact, I can confess that I had never worked harder in the past. I have won a lot of accolades in the past as well, but there has been several firsts for me during this stint with CARE. Last year, I won the National Strategic CFO Award. It was the first time somebody from the development sector had won that. I added another CFO award for technology adoption. I was invited to a TV talk show, interviewed by Economic Times, and even got a chance to visit IIM and interact with the B school students. None of this happened before.
Yeah.
So I'll say I really, that's how I've tried to plan and grow my career. And I'm extremely grateful to my family, my parents' blessings, colleagues, my managers, mentors in the industry, and above all, the Almighty, whatever I have achieved. But I really believe we all only deserve is a styrofoam.
Yep. Yep. Fantastic. Fantastic. I think you've touched upon some very, very valuable points here, Rohit. Incredibly valuable. Challenging the status quo. It's so important. And I think for us as finance professionals, the time has really come, and it came a few years back when we were sort of forced to recognize the fact that we are not just number crunchers. To be successful in our careers in the future that we are now living in, and we will live in the future, in the next few years, if we keep doing what we've always done, we will reach a plateau very, very soon. And many chartered accountants reach that plateau in their career, to be honest. I've seen many of them. But it is only when you recognize the value of changing the status quo, understanding where the problems are, trying to solve a problem for somebody else, connecting the dots. The things that you were talking about, Rohit, are so important. And that is something that all of these young chartered accountants and finance professionals who are watching this session should understand, that just acquiring that technical knowledge is not going to be sufficient in your careers. It is what you do with that skill, right? And one of the critical aspects is to connect the dots. And Rohit, I want to understand from you. You mentioned that very early in your career, you started talking with people, understanding how they have charted their career paths, what kind of career path should you chart. And a lot of it boils down to you getting out of your seat or desk and your comfort zone and having those conversations with people that many of us sort of avoid because we are maybe introverted and we feel uncomfortable talking to people. Tell us how you did that. How did you have that recognition or realization very early in your career that you needed to talk to more and more people to build your network, to deepen your knowledge and awareness and understanding of what the industry demands and what the company wants and what the end goal is for you as well as for the organization? How did you get that realization, and how did you make it happen for yourself?
Sure, Abhinav. Let me admit, I was absolutely a novice, very little understanding and awareness about how the industry works. In fact, when I started my CA, as I said, being inspired by my father's close friend, I was looking to make a career in practice. But then over a period of time, I decided that, probably industry is the better place for me. So here I was, as we all, feel very proud once we've completed our CA, joined the industry, and I thought, okay, there would be a lot of things already set up for me, and I just need to go and execute and make contribution. But it doesn't work like that. And I think most of us have been through that churn, that once you enter an industry, it's a completely different world. What you have learned or mastered in academics may not really truly translate into the practical world. So one really needs to always have a beginner's mindset. I think that's what I learned very early in my career, that I really always have to have that beginner's mindset. So I sort of, really dropped any the halo effect around being a chartered accountant, and really got down to understanding how things are working, how the operation runs. And the best way to do it would be to engage with people. So, and I was also very fortunate that, in the teams I was working, since I was always very hungry and eager to learn, people also were very forthcoming. They would share with me, how it operates and all. And that's how it started building up. And I used to attend, there used to be very hardly, any seminars or conferences at that time, but I used to attend those. And in one of those conferences, I happened to meet with Mr. Mohandas Pai, the Infosys CFO. And he talked about the fact that how to be a successful finance personnel, you really need to grow and move beyond a pure accounting background and accounting experience. So that learning also stayed with me, and I started looking beyond my core role in the accounts function. And it was not easy because, some people would welcome that. Some people would think that probably you are intruding into their space. So, so one has to really work around, see wherever we can, because we have to do our core job as well. We can't leave our core job and get into a training mode. So it has to be a combination of how you continue to deliver on your core job and yet also take time to observe, learn how other people are doing their work, and gain insights onto that and develop yourself accordingly.
Got it.
So I think I was able to do that well, and that helped me to gain better traction and better understanding of the functions across the organization.
Right. Very valuable. And all of you guys who are listening to this or who will later on, please understand that it's incredibly important to go out and talk to people. Just remaining within your silos or talking to people you are sitting next to or are very comfortable with is not going to take you very, very far. You need to get out of the comfort zone and talk to more people, build your network and understanding. That's very important. And Rohit, you spoke about the fact that you continue to learn, and I think you continue to learn, and I'll come to that later. But uh, I noticed that you did your CISA in 2010, which was 12 years after qualifying as a chartered accountant. That's a sort of time when people are starting to just enjoy the fruits of their labor and they forget about studying. What made you go back to it? What was the reason that you decided to do CISA, and how's that decision helped you in your career after that?
Sure. Thanks, Abhinav, for really scanning through my career journey. Get that question. So as I was learning and developing the new skills on my CFO pathway, I realized that the future CFO must look beyond the traditional roles in finance. Needs to be an enterprise-wide strategist and proactive decision maker. Hence, it becomes really imperative for us to understand IT. And at that time, the usage of IT and technology were really growing across India and the world. So that's what I decided, that probably, it will be very important for me because when we did our studies, it was all manual work. Although we were working on computers and all, but it was, I would say, still only basic understanding and knowledge about how Excel works. There were no PPTs, etc. So I thought that again, there weren't many people also across who would really have a in-depth understanding of the IT space. So the CISA, the Certified Information System Auditor course, is the global course. Our institute also adopted it later on, and it's called DISA, as most of you would already be aware. So I happened to enroll myself in CISA to better understand the nuances of IT controls and the IT risks. Because to be successful, whether we are doing audits or we have to really drive the organization forward as a CFO, knowledge of information system was critical. And again, let me admit, it was very difficult to study after a long gap. The moment I used to start, I used to just give up. But again, very thankful to my family, my managers, that as I shared this desire with them, they provided me the support, and I happened to again fortunately clear that in the first attempt as well. So because and I see the real the fruits of that coming in today. I may not have fully realized this when I was doing the course, but in today's world, as you can see, the role of CFO and CIO are quite intertwined. And in fact, a growing number of IT heads are in fact reporting to the CFOs. Hence, it's very important for CFO or the head of finance to understand and leverage technology. So I would encourage all of you to spend time with your IT counterparts and probably develop at least a working knowledge. We cannot be an expert. We don't need to be an expert in every sphere or every function, but we need to really have some working knowledge so that we can leverage the opportunities. So just like in my CA, we have good understanding about the Income Tax Act. My CS background gave me a better appreciation of the corporate world, how the Corporate Companies Act is there. Similarly, the CISA degree helped me understand a bit of a nuances about the IT and how does the information flows.
Right.
Sure. That's how it's been really helpful.
Sure. That's $1 million advice, folks. I hope you understand what Rohit's tried to tell you today, the importance and the intertwining of technology with finance. And it'll only continue to evolve in the next few years as newer technologies continue to sort of invade our finance domain. If we don't have understanding of technology and deeper understanding of technology, like I usually share with you guys the 3-tier skill framework, where we talk about technology as being one of those critical skills that each one of us needs to have. You guys need to build deeper understanding of technology, so start focusing on that. And the other thing that I noticed, Rohit, is this very clear approach that you had towards building a pathway to becoming a CFO. Now, a lot of this audience is very early on in their careers. Some of them are working for audit firms, big four firms. Some of them are trying to get into industry. And there's a lot of discussion and debate that I have with my students around which career paths to choose. Now, CFO, of course, is an awesome career path, and many of the people here would like to become CFOs. How do you suggest, or what would be your advice to these youngsters if they believe, or if their long-term vision is to become a CFO 10 or 15 years hence from now? How should they plan their career? What kind of decisions should they be taking right now? Because uh, the question that people have in their mind is, if I start working, let's say in a controllership kind of an environment, or in a accounting environment, or in a FP&A kind of environment, would I become too siloed? How would I eventually chart my way to becoming a CFO? Because to become a CFO, you need to know pretty much everything within the finance domain. So what would be your advice to youngsters around that?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. So to become a CFO, you need to know everything. So
Yeah.
all these individual sub-functions, whether it is FP&A, or it's, that matter, accounts payable, accounts receivable, taxation, we all need to have a good experience and understanding of that, and once you know the basic nuances of all, when you grow as a CFO, nobody can really, game anything in front of you. You know exactly under you, if the team members are working, exactly, you can appreciate and understand the challenges they are facing. Are they just, making it up, or, is it for real? So for that to happen, and talent management is a very, very critical element of a CFO role. So a CFO cannot live in another heaven and just order stuff to be done. I think the command and control culture is long gone. So today, if you have to really earn respect as a CFO, you also need to understand the nuances of all the respective sub-functions. Again, you need to have the team who are the experts in that, but to have an intellectually stimulating discussion with them, to share ideas and build on a better brainstorming. If you don't have a good understanding of those respective functions, it will not really help. So I would encourage that, as each one of you are doing or working in particular areas, keep doing that, get good understanding and mastery of that area. But at the same time, also start planning your move to the next function. That could be within the same organization, or in case unfortunately if there aren't any options available, you can also plan to switch. But it's very, very important that if you are looking to grow as a CFO, and I'm not saying that specialist careers in these individual fields are bad, each one of them can be equally rewarding. Just like for a cricket team to succeed, we need specialist batsmen, bowlers, wicket keepers, and all-rounders as well. So each of these individual career options are equally good if you are able to differentiate yourself and do work in those areas. But for a CFO vision, you really need to ensure that you have enough experience and understanding across the various gamut of finance functions.
Right, right, absolutely valuable. And one of the ways that all of us should be looking at our careers is it's not just about upward growth. It is also about lateral growth. Uh, in my career, for example, I have taken multiple lateral moves. I've moved from one domain to another domain at the same level in hierarchy, and I'm sure so has Rohit. And whichever senior leader you look around yourself, you would realize that they've also done the same things. I mean, when I was working for American Express for many years, one of the advice that almost every very senior leader used to give us was, do not just look at upward moves, look at lateral moves, because that is how you will broad base your knowledge and experience, and build a longer term success path, just like Rohit has done. You need to understand multiple different aspects of business and finance to eventually become a CFO. And the other thing, Rohit, which a CFO requires is this strategic thought process, because CFO is not just about getting the balance sheet done, or getting the plan or the forecast done, or getting the compliances done. The CFO is also now equal partner with the CEO, making decisions and everything. So how do you develop that sort of a strategic acumen that you actually get the seat on the table and the CEO comes to you seeking advice, and you are a part of making those major business decisions around products, markets, investments, etc. So how do you develop that sort of strategic mindset?
Sure. Well, in my humble opinion, Abhinav and everybody, so the CFO is pretty much the only position in the organization that is best positioned to see all the connections and dots across the bigger picture of the company. Everybody else is, excelling, but they are focused on their respective zones. So CFO, because ultimately it comes down to the performance and the numbers. So as CFO, you are in a better position to understand the broader aspect. The challenge is, how do you get everyone else also to agree with this holistic view of the business? Somebody may be doing very well in their respective domain, but that may not be really fitting into the overall strategy or growth path of the organization. So that's where, as I earlier mentioned, the EQ skills. In today's world, it is really paramount that the influencing and persuasion skills are at the forefront. Modern workplace, people really have to influence and persuade to gain agreement, even with their direct reports, managers, cross-functional team members, to help achieve any path-breaking results. We talk about a lot about digitization and transformation, but you can Google and see that global research substantiates that majority of such digital transformation projects fail. These fail not because of technology, but people not being aligned. So you would remember Chak De India, where the coach Shah Rukh Khan, first stresses on how everybody should play together first, before even thinking about strategies and growth path. So aligning people mindset towards a common goal is the single largest contributor to any successful change management project. In fact, I would say digital is only 10% tech and 90% human. So that's where CFOs should really act as an integrator and navigator for the organization, and always focus and believe in winning together, because nobody alone can do it. And those are the traits which really, help CFO gain respect and help people rally behind. Because as I said, everybody is too focused and they want to excel in their respective domain. The CFO should really aim and focus to winning together. So that's very, very important. So I never tire of reminding people that how every action, process, or procedure has a direct correlation to the efficiency, and means my role also goes back and show the team that how their efforts have directly impacted the company. So I have to be very transparent and share how these actions are translating into results. So sometimes I see myself as a chief facilitation officer, but you really need to be a catalyst for leading and driving change. And that's how you emerge and grow as a trusted business advisor to be able to influence the future roadmap of the company.
Sure. Absolutely valid point. And you very rightly said that CFO really is probably the only person who has a view to everything that happens. And there are obviously, I'm sure you face those situations when you have to say no, or you have to come up with alternate solutions, and you will have to push back. How do you manage your relationships in those times? Incredibly challenging role, but very satisfying, I can imagine. Let's talk a little bit about the development sector here, Rohit, since you joined Care India in 2017, right? 2017 is when you joined. A very unconventional move, I would think, working with Dell for 10 years, some of the global giants in IT industry, and then taking a move into development sector, which a lot of us feel is maybe not a very growth-centric career path, or not very challenging. What what made you make that shift? And that's why I called the topic or the title of this session the purpose-driven CFO, because I'd like to understand what made you move from this purely commercial world into the service sector. What was the driver for your decision? And just help us understand, what have you accomplished here as an individual, as a professional?
Sure, Abhinav. In fact, ever since my childhood, I would say my parents, especially my mother, had inculcated the spirit of giving, and that too by being mindful of the dignity of the receiver and shunning any giver's pride. So she always taught us that there is no exercise better for the heart than reaching down and lifting people up. So I have vivid memories of going with my mother and feeding the poor, helping the people with uh, arms and etc. So that always stayed with me. I've been trying to follow the same in my own small way. As I joined the corporate world, I'd been an active participant in community initiatives. However, deep down, there was always an urge to bring in a problem-solving attitude to these social issues rather than just a bleeding heart. You can just go one day and spend time with the community and just come back and then forget everything about it. So I really, something which started bothering me was that with my education, my corporate experience, can I bring about a new perspective, where I see myself adding value and giving back to the community? So am I being able to really be part of something which changes the world around me? And I strongly believe that, the service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on Mother Earth. So that's what, it started, I started thinking on those lines, and that's where I got the opportunity. As you rightly said, yes, there is a lot of, I would say, this misconception that life is very cushy in the development sector. But I would encourage you all to Google Mr. Azim Premji's famous quote. He said that this is more complex than running a business. Issues are much more subtle, convictions are much more difficult to drive home, and incentives to people are not in money, but in recognizing and appreciating their work in social service. So this is coming from Mr. Azim Premji himself. And giving back to the society really requires much more patience and humility than running a for-profit business. As a not-for-profit CFO, one really has to wear many different hats, as resources are always scarce. However, the most satisfying part is about making a difference. So you will have the chance to see the impact your work is making. My key goal here is to really steward our resources in such a way that ensures we provide the maximum benefit to our communities. Incredibly humbling feeling for me personally. I'll say I get more fulfillment here in a day than probably I got in months or a year in my past corporate career. And in terms of growth opportunities, as I shared, there have been several firsts for me already, whether it's industry recognition or getting the. I even also joined the National CII committee, the CFO committee. So probably I think we all really need to bust the myth that development sector is a completely different or something which we should not look at. This sector is really growing, and as we all are aware, Companies Act also mandates corporations to spend 2% of their net profit in CSR activities. So the large corporates are also looking at partners in the development world who can really run the operations efficiently, who can put effective use of the money which they are spending in community initiatives. So in fact, here in CARE, I already implemented a ERP system, and given the fact that there are certain rules which are unique to India On top of that, there are certain regulations which are applicable only to the not-for-profit world, and especially to companies who raise funds abroad. So sometimes I joke back with my colleagues in for-profit world that you have to really maintain books as per the Companies Act and get the audit done, which we also have to do. Plus, I need to also maintain a different set of books for all the foreign funding which we get, which doesn't happen in the normal corporate world. So that's an additional dynamics for a Section 8 company like us. And there are separate audit reporting requirements for the same. And then we get all these grants and donations from large corporates who then would also want to audit us. None of these things happen in a for-profit world.
Yep.
So some of these nuances, you can see the role is as challenging. As I said, I got interviewed by Economic Times, and the topic of the discussion was that the role of CFO in a not-for-profit world is probably as challenging as in the for-profit world. So I can rest assure you that in terms of the excitement factor, in terms of the learning, in terms of the challenges, development sector is not very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably more satisfying. So for this group of people, what kind of careers can young chartered accountants forge in the development sector or in the not-for-profit sector? Are there opportunities that young professionals can pursue? Because a lot of these people that I spoke to who are on this call right now, they are very service-driven. Let me tell you, a lot of these people, talk to me about the fact that they'd actually like to contribute and do more meaningful work. So there is probably that desire within, but probably a lack of awareness, which stops young people from building careers in the not-for-profit sector or the service sector, development sector. What suggestions or advice would you give to these people on how can they build a career in this particular sector?
Well, so I think finance is pretty much structured similar way as in any for-profit sector. So we have roles in accounting, budgeting, MIS, analytics. I am a big fan of analytics. Which I think that's another skill which encourage everyone to develop, because there is already, I think, an urgent need for the CFOs to transition from being descriptive and diagnostic to more predictive and prescriptive. So analytics is going to play a big role in our success. Information is the oil of the 21st century. Analytics is the combustion engine. So that is again one area where we also encourage, I encourage my team members to come up with better dashboards, analyze the business, and provide more insights rather than just focusing on historical reporting. In fact, we have been hiring young chartered accountants, and one of them, in fact, really confessed to me recently that when he started, he wasn't really too much excited about it. But now when he sees the type of exposure he has got, as compared to some of his peers in other sectors, he's hugely excited and would really want to continue to grow in this sector as well. So there is no dearth of opportunities. In fact, the sector is looking for talented people, and whether it's finance or program development or marketing or IT skills, as the sector continues to grow. In fact, if you may have heard of SEBI coming up with the social stock exchange. So probably another year or two, we could have companies getting listed on the social stock exchange. So you can well imagine the type of talent requirement which is needed and the type of growth opportunities ahead in the sector.
Yeah. No, fantastic. And I'm assuming that this is music to many people's ears. And Rohit, expect to get some messages after this session over the next few days from people who might seek your guidance and mentorship. It's exciting, folks. I can't think of a more exciting and more fulfilling and satisfying career than going and working in this sector, and especially in a country like ours, which has such a great need and opportunity to serve. So, look out for those kind of careers, and, get a little bit away from the conventional and try out something which is going to be far more satisfying for you. Okay, now I saw a few questions popping up on the screen, folks. I promise I'll give you more time today than I did give you last time. But one more question before I hand it over to the audience, and we'll have some of the audience ask questions. So guys, please prepare your questions and make sure you ask the toughest ones to Rohit. But last question, Rohit, I wanted to speak to you about leadership. Which is such an important aspect. Technically, you are sound, and I've worked in many different companies, and we all develop those technical skills. But leadership is what really differentiates us. What is your leadership style? How do you lead people? What kind of legacy are you building with people?
Sure, Abhinav. Yeah, I think I strongly believe that there cannot be a single style which is apt for today's world. Especially in this VUCA environment, there is no single way or style of leading change, driving people, managing talent. So, but something which really is critical for the leader to really be ahead of the curve. So that's really what is important. If you look at an example of imagine a boat sailing in the middle of the sea being hit by a thunderstorm. So we would have a group of people who may be a bit of pessimist, who would complain about the wind. Then there would be some optimist who would expect the wind to change. Now, only a true leader, he would get up and adjust the sails. So I think that's what true leadership is all about for me. And I also strive to be. I don't claim to be really a perfect leader, but that's what I always strive to be. That as a leader, one really needs to jump in and makes the change, so that he or she becomes the change, and then really inspire the team members to become leaders in their own sphere or in their own function. To me, that would be probably a real test of leadership.
Fantastic. So it's not just about driving change. I think it's also about being a catalyst for change. As a leader, aspiring to help your team understand the value of change and helping them get ahead of the curve as change happens, so that they can future proof themselves or make themselves more successful in the future. I think that's a very important quality for a leader to have. How do you inspire your team to continue to grow and develop, so that even after you are gone and doing different things in life, those people continue to grow, leave that legacy behind. It's so powerful and so effective. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I get really a great fulfillment when some of my past team members, when a lot of them are still in touch with me, when they call me and they share some of things which have happened. I may have also forgotten those, but some conversations, some initiatives, as they recall, it's a very, very humbling feeling, and I really feel that probably I did something right at that time, which has really helped them groom.
Yeah, and that's what we are living for. At the end of the day, I always tell young CAs that you guys are going to become very rich. All of you will make a lot of money, but what will really differentiate success is how many lives have you changed, or how many people have you affected in a manner that their life got impacted in a good way. So fantastic, Rohit. It was awesome. And now let's take some audience questions, folks, one by one. Switch on your video. Okay, Prashant's popped up first. Prashant, have you heard yourself? All right, Prashant worked with me for some time. Rohit, Prashant's also a CFO, but he's from the consumer goods industry. So Prashant, go ahead.
Hi, Rohit. Thank you for your knowledge sharing. I just had one question. Very, very interesting thing you mentioned about emotional quotient. During your initial years, you developed that. How did you develop that? And another one is how it helped you in growing as a CFO.
Sure. Thanks, Prashant. I wish you, speedy recovery. Take care. Yeah. So, yeah, as I shared, Prashant, that I soon realized that the technical competence alone is not going to help me grow and climb up the ladder. And when you are leading large teams, especially in large organizations, you really need to get everyone together to achieve any path-breaking results. And life is not that simple that you may apply the best of logics and you may just ask everybody to that, hey, here's my proposal, and people will just rally behind and say yes. That happens very rarely in the real world. So, but I was also I used to think that that's the way to go, and I've had my setbacks where some proposals or some initiatives I thought are really super and can be just we need to just implement it immediately, but faced a lot of resistance from others, and I never used to comprehend that what is the problem, what is the challenge, why aren't this other team member getting this logic. so so as I used to then talk to this about my mentors and other senior members, that's where I understood the concept of what's in it for me. It's WIIFM, what's in it for me. That's a very, very powerful concept. If each one of us sort of gets driven by, how this particular action is adding value to me, or how is it going to help me. So we are all humans. So, logic, emotions sometimes get mixed up. So it's very, very important that you stress upon the similarities or the commonalities between you and the other person. Many times we get into this, male game, challenging each other, saying, no, this is not right, this is not right. That doesn't take you anywhere. I've also learned it the hard way. No amount of logic and all those will help. So that's where I started changing my approach and focusing on what is common between the other functional person and me, and then build on to those commonalities and identify those and say, okay, hey, these are the three things we both agree on, and now these are the next couple of steps. What is your suggestion? How can we do this? And how, coming from a finance or a number person, how it will also gel well in terms of the overall productivity aspect. And that I found started changing the entire course of the conversation. Suddenly people were more forthcoming, and those resistances really dropped. And that's where I realized it's not as difficult as it seems to be. So people are not really difficult, I would say, but they are different. So, but when we deal with them, we come with our own thought process. We want to impress upon them that I am right, this is how it should be. And that creates problem. Although ultimately I may have my way. That's also important, that we really need to ensure that we do the right things. But just by having everybody along, having enough brainstorming, getting their views on the table, making them feel heard, works wonders. That's what I have learned, and it has helped me again, grow in my career. So, whenever there are any difficult decisions, sometimes I am the go-to man that, hey, Rohit, can you talk to people, socialize before we get, important decisions in the meetings done? And I can, empirical evidence I have that whenever I've been able to socialize before, understand that, the meeting, the decisions have been more productive. If I have not done it, it's been very, very challenging. I hope that answers your query.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you, Prashant. Take care and get well soon. I'll speak to you soon, Prashant. All right, Balkishan's popped up before anybody else could.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Yeah. Sir, hello to everybody, sir, and Abhinav, sir, and
Sorry,
Nayyar, sir. Okay.
What of background noise?
Background noise.
Is it clear right now, sir?
Yeah, it is.
Not very clear.
Is everybody else's mic
Abhinav, is it
on?
my side?
Hello.
Balkishan, there's a lot of background noise. I think you'll have to
Okay,
type
okay.
your question.
Okay, sir. I will type it out. You please take up some other question. I will just type it out.
Sure. All right, guys. Who's the next one who's got a question? Anybody else who's got a question? Varun, you were typing something earlier on. You want to ask your question?
Sure, sir. So it's a very incredible to know your thoughts. So I had a particular question about asking, like, as you grow in your career, how do you tackle your office politics? And is any tips you have for developing the people skills with your team members?
Sure. Thanks, Varun, for that. I think my simple answer to office politics is just stay away from office politics. I think I haven't seen anybody, we may feel for a short time, somebody who's active in office politics succeeding, but as they say, you cannot fool all the people all the time. So office politics and engaging into this is not going to take you far ahead in your career. So I, for one, have always stayed away and focused on, building myself up instead of, really cutting down anyone. I think that in the long run will always help you in and keep you in good stead. And focus your energies on driving excellence, managing your team well, instead of engaging into any office politics.
Okay, sir. And my
Yeah.
second question, sir, was like, is there any special tips you have for developing your people skills with your team and developing more robust relationships with them so that we both work together and create more win-win situations for each other?
Yeah, sure, Varun. So I have had the good fortune of leading global teams, whether it's in the US, France, Asia Pacific. And when I started, I was pretty apprehensive, and that we Indians are we have a way of our culture in terms of how we interact with people, and somehow we are still a bit of indirect. If you understand between being more direct and indirect. While as we understand, people in the Western world, they are more direct, probably,
Right.
so I used to really fear that, hey, how will I manage such a, people across nationalities?
Right.
But then
Yeah.
as I started engaging with them, and one has to really start with an element of trust,
Yeah.
and ultimately, as it boils down, that pretty much the basic needs for every individual, every employee working in the organization are pretty much standard. They all want to be heard. They all want to get good feedback, do quality work, and grow.
Right.
So I think this pretty much sort of are the key aspirations for any individual in the corporate world. And as long as you as a manager are able to provide them those opportunities, understand their viewpoints, appreciate the differences within the team, because not everyone would be thinking alike. There would be different ideas coming. So a good manager or leader really need to assimilate and synthesize those ideas. Hear everybody, have an open discussion, do brainstorming, but then as we arrive at a decision point, my strict rule was that when we go out of the meeting, we are all one. We are all aligned to this decision or this action. So, because that is the only way you can drive, unified action. If at the end of the meeting also your team members feel that they have not been heard, or things are not clear, then your initiatives will fail. So I, for one, have always tried that, understand and get all the ideas and bake the proposal accordingly. But then once it is decided and agreed, we should all be wedded to the same.
I think so. Thank you, sir, for so much for sharing these thoughts. I think developing the key takeaway which I can take from here is like creating an environment that the people are open to share their views, and then as a team we take one decision and we all align to that. So, sir, thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's very helpful.
Very
Thank
helpful
you.
indeed. And guys, one of the quotes that Rohit made while answering Prashant's question will stay with me. He said, "People are not difficult; they're different." I think that's a fantastic thing to say. And remember it. Every time you're facing a conflict situation or a difficult situation with people, remind yourself of this thing. People are not difficult; they're different. Just because somebody is not agreeing to your point of view doesn't mean that he's a difficult person. It just means that the person is different from you, and you have to find a common ground. Okay. So, Rohit, we got a bunch of questions on the chat box. Do you have another 7-8 minutes? We'll try to answer as many in the next 7 minutes, and then we'll let you go back to your Saturday.
Sure, Abhinav.
Okay.
Happy to.
Okay, so we'll take up Balkishan's question. I think what Balkishan wants to say is that he's saying during the COVID times, as everyone's getting affected, it'll be very hard to get donations. But on the other hand, there is an urgency that people are affected and we need to contribute more. So as finance professionals and as leaders, how can we deal with, or how are we dealing with such a situation? I think he's asking more from your position in the in not-for-profit environment. How are you dealing with it, or what would be your advice to people in this environment?
Yeah, as thanks, Balkishan, for that. It's a very, very relevant question. And in these times when there is a lot of challenge and crisis in the society, the role of the NGOs or not-for-profit, in fact, is even more required. So that's where, we in Care India have also come up with a response strategy, which is multi-pronged. We are looking at immediate support, where we did a lot of community activities in terms of distribution of dry ration, PPE kits to the frontline workers, the migrant workers across different states of the country. And then not to leave at that, we have another strategy in place to ensure that once the immediate crisis is over, how we help them get back onto their livelihoods. So whether it's about skill training or building resilience, just like when a natural calamity happens, we often see that aid pours in immediately during the first couple of months, and then somehow people forget about the impacted population. The real test or the real challenge begins after the initial couple of months, where when people go back, they realize that, oh, their fields are flooded, their livelihood is gone, schools have been damaged. So I think that's where the role of the civil society really is very, very critical. And there are, we have been fortunate that our large donors, be it institutions or corporates, really understand and participate in this. And they continue to support us through all this pandemic, looking at how we are also changing our approach. We are also trying to help the community to the best of our ability. And from a CFO perspective, I think that is where every donor really looks at a lot of transparency. So in fact, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, transparency is very, very critical element, because somehow, somewhere there seems to be a trust deficit where people, corporate world may think that, oh, this company, are they really in fact utilizing my funds effectively or not? So that's where the role of CFO becomes critical. The role of technology in the company becomes critical, so that we can know and show that this is how all the funding has been put to use, and all the beneficiaries identified, listed, and reporting done back to our donors, which gives them added confidence to contribute more, because I think we all in our heart of hearts want to contribute and give it back to the society, but probably we are all just struggling with how to do it. So in organizations like Care India are really one of the preferred choices for such institutions and corporates, that this is the way one can really do and help the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Answer you?
I'm sure he did. His voice is not good today. So, all right. One more question here from Akshara. Akshara says, hi, sir. Is there any difference between work cultures in for-profit and not-for-profit organizations? If yes, how are they different?
Yeah, I think there are always, some cultural differences even within for-profit work as well. As, Abhinav would also vouch for, in different industries, whether it's media industry or say a manufacturing company, there are different cultures everywhere. So not-for-profit is also, has its own unique culture where you would have people not entirely driven by financial incentives, but really looking how they can contribute more and how they can support the community. So sometimes again for a CFO, if I try to put everything in numbers perspective, I also get a pushback, because in a not-for-profit world, everything is not about numbers. But at the same time, we have to be stable. We have to really have some growth and development initiative activities done. So we really need to be also mindful of how we are effectively utilizing the funds and how we are able to save the funds. So, but those discussions are like, anywhere else also, in any organization where, a particular function would like investment to happen in a certain area, and there would be, deliberations with the CFO that, how and what can be done. So in that sense, from a finance perspective, I would say it's pretty much similar everywhere. Because the key duty of the finance guy is, the fiduciary duty, that we really need to ensure that funds are put to use in the most effective and productive way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that answer, Rohit. And these questions aren't stopping. Guys, I'm just going to take one more question. And then my suggestion is, if Rohit doesn't mind that, I'll actually recommend you guys to connect with Rohit on LinkedIn. He's pretty active on LinkedIn, and send him your questions, and do connect with him and learn from him. Like it happened with Sanjay Khanna last time, you guys realize how much value you get by interacting with people who've spent so many years in the industry, who've been through all of this grind. So just one last question that Sylvia was asking. Rohit, you mentioned about the importance of analytical skills. Sylvia wants to understand, how can a young professional develop the analytical mindset and skills?
Sure, that's a great question, I think, and that's also, as I mentioned, is a very, very critical skill as finance professionals. We are sort of tuned to only look at historical reporting, and getting into too much data, segment reporting, blah, blah, blah. It has its own value. But if you really, really need to develop yourself as a CFO, your CEO and your board is not looking at, as much historical data points from you. Instead, they are looking at, how do we plan for the future? What do we need to do ahead? So that's where I think the role of CFO also becomes very, very critical, that how a CFO is able to utilize those past historical information and then predict the trend for the future. Because ultimately, it's what we are going to do in the future going to determine the growth path of the organization. We've all heard about, how large organizations like Kodak, Nokia, they were the market leaders at one time, and they've slipped into oblivion. So it's very important to keep reinventing, keep changing. We can really not sit on our laurels. So developing analytics based on that information and coming up with predictive models is very, very important in today's world. And not everything can be perfect. I think we don't need to really stress upon coming with one perfect model which will define or cover everything. But we really need to create scenarios. That is one way also to start predicting the future. When I started my career, we used to apply to banks for loans, and we used to give projections for 5 years, 10 years. Nowadays, I think even predicting for 2 to 3 years would be a sort of a big challenge and nightmarish. So, in that sense, the projection cycles have also shrunk.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important, as whenever, I would say whenever your manager gives you something to do, try to always see how much you can, do more than what is required. If we have to do a variance analysis, many times he would just come back and say, okay, yes, this expense item went down by 10%, or this went up by 20%, and that's it. Now, numbers alone cannot give the complete story. I strongly believe in that. It only gives half the story. We really need to ask ourselves, why is this happening? That is where, first we need to ask, why is this happening? The answer again does not lie within finance. And for that, you need to engage with your cross-functional teams. You need to understand, hey, how come the marketing spend grew by 20%? What did we do? And then see whether that initiative which we did it result in any meaningful gain or not? So that when you report back, you will say marketing expenses have grown by 20%, but that has resulted in so much more benefit for the organization. So suddenly you are giving not only a historical perspective about cost going up, but you are also sharing back that whether that was good for the company, or should we continue that, or should we stop that? It may also come to the stage where you say, oh, certain expenses have grown 100%, but the net result has been 0. So probably it's the time to stop those activities. So those type of insights are very, very critical, and so that's where, we as finance professionals should not stop at just calculating the variance. The Excel will do it for us. But something which Excel, robotics, automation will not do for us is this judgment, the analysis.
Yeah.
So that is where, despite all the buzz around automation, machine learning, if we have our judgment skills, if we can understand the context, if we have the emotional intelligence to be able to connect with people, believe you me, there is no dearth for opportunities, no growth. It's laden. You will have tremendous growth in your career. But we really need to focus on these skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic answer, Rohit. I think this was just amazing. Because analytics in my mind is more about the attitude, your mindset. And then once you develop the mindset to go behind the numbers, to have the ability to look into the future by projecting what might happen, looking at the trends and scenarios, and then learning the skill itself. The technical side is relatively easier. You can go and do a course in SAS or SQL or Tableau. Those things are easy. So, don't make the mistake of putting the cart before the horse. First, develop the mindset for analytics, and then get the technical skills. It's not very difficult, but it's vital. All right, Rohit, I'm going to let you go back and enjoy your Saturday. But folks, please remember a few very important messages that Rohit has shared with us today. Always challenge the status quo when it comes to your work and when it comes to your career. I think both. It's very, very important. Develop emotional intelligence and emotional quotient. You will need it to deal with very unique situations which you will come across in your career while working with your peers, with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your customers, etc. And continue to grow and develop, just like Rohit has continued to try and do. Study and develop new skills, develop new leadership traits, which will help you move forward in your career. Because if you stay static at where you are in terms of your skill, you will eventually start losing out to others who will be moving faster than you, because they will be developing new skills like Rohit has done. So Rohit, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic. As you can probably see in the chat box, the questions haven't stopped, so I've had to cut off. But maybe from next time onwards, I'll just stop talking myself and let the audience ask all the questions. It'll make my life easier. But it's been a pleasure having you, Rohit. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure the audience has loved it as well.
Thank you very much, Abhinav. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and your patient hearing. I hope this was useful for you all. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys. Enjoy your rest of the Saturday and keep these learnings with you. Take care and bye-bye.